Hi. Great to see you all here. Last time you were all like sweaty, smelly, asleep. At least you're now awake. So I'm gonna give you a bit of insight in what, I come from a rabbit hole, and sometimes I try to peek out what's happening in the real world. And I guess this is a bit about how it looks in the rabbit hole, what to expect from it. And that rabbit hole is actually crypto communities, and you could call it decentralized ecosystems, but, well, decentralization is a big word. Anyways, I'd love to share some thoughts, because I think it's important to see at which point in time you're right now, and which paths you can take with early experience like Blockchaingers and so. So it's all about value creation. And we create value through minimizing local entropy and maximizing global entropy, and we have to do stuff that's useful for humans. And we have a lot of protocols in place, and, well, corporate executives are becoming less popular now. People are doing more like startup founders things, working from home, contributing to online ecosystems, maybe just having like some kind of platform working. But you see, that's 2000, so now we're already one little bit further. And we're at this point, and I guess most of you are right at this point, where you have to choose. Are you taking the red pill or the blue pill? Let's do a poll. Red pill? Few. Yes, only on the after party, but yes. Who's taking the blue pill? All of you, yes. So here is a red pill. It's a bit conformistic. It's basically working under institutions, and here is the blue pill. And let's see what's happening here. Well, welcome to the black hole of blockchain and crypto communities. Why it's a black hole? Because before many people entered, they really didn't know what's happening in there. You cannot see it really from the event horizon, but once you're in, it's very difficult to pull yourself out. You cannot go back anymore. So I think these things should make it less of a black hole, and more like radiating a little bit of information to the outside world. But what drives me, and I hope many of you, are 4 of these things. One of them is decentralization, which means get away from localized power and distribute power, make everybody participate in public open markets, look at utilities, Nature 2.0. The other thing that's very important is self-sovereignty, be in control. Our digital rights are being compromised every day, and people don't really care, but they start caring once they see they've been pawned. So having a form of self-sovereignty in an internet that will stick in the future, everything you put online will stay there for your lifetime and beyond. So better have a bit of control over that. We work a lot about aligned incentives. And this is beautiful, because a lot of people work out of instant gratification, which means that they want to have a reward quickly. But if you have a network that spits out a reward, maybe through a heartbeat like a block reward, and it incentivizes people to collaborate to achieve something more global, like impact funds, like public health, like public intelligence. All of these things can only appear if people have that instant gratification, but actually are contributing to something that's more global and has longer-term prospects. And of course, well, what supports all of this is cryptography, because in crypto we trust. For all the rest, machine learning, I don't know. But cryptography is becoming more and more important because it allows us to make open public systems that are crowd-audited. Right? Think about putting out a network and put on maybe 50 billion of value on that network, all in public. Everybody can look at the source code. If it gets hacked, then you know you have a problem in your source code and you want to change something. But I guess no bank has ever had a more public audit than one of those networks. Just interesting to see that we're moving away from firewalls to public crypto. And this is what it's all about. This is what currently is driving many people in the space, because they want to not create a trust machine, they want to create an incentive machine. And think about Bitcoin, for example. It makes people create mining rigs, a new economy. It actually incentivizes people to create specific chips to tap all their energy into that. People are actually doing it just to get that reward from the system. Now, with Bitcoin, it's only security, but we can think about other things. If we know what the objective of a network would be, then we could steer human behavior towards that network objective. And then you're entering something what we call mechanism design or game theory and behavioral economics. And it's super interesting because you're trying to steer people to do something together. And what can we do together? Well, we can pool resources. We can make stuff more sustainable. We can do governance. We can make things for public utility consumption, like water and electricity. You might have other things out there, like mobility, logistics, manufacturing. There's so many things that we still have to explore. And the goal of all of this is to create a public network that everybody can contribute. You could call it an operating system for society. I would go with that one as well. But what this network does is one very important thing. It's public, it's open, it's an open market. Everybody can contribute. This means that if you have such a vast market or pooling, then the marginal cost of that resource or utility goes almost to zero. And that's the interesting thing. Think about a fully decentralized energy grid that's not owned and controlled by somebody, but that just operates at the lowest marginal cost. What's the cost of actual sustainability of that network? So, and then you can start planning other types of incentives like universal basic income. Talk to JP about all these things. He's shown me a lot of lights that was like, oh yeah. So big shout out. So I wanted to look like an economist, so I put a lot of graphs on top of each other and added a few colors, and it's just meaningless because I realized I'm using logarithmic scale on top of linear scale, and still it fits. Beautiful, hey? Are you intrigued? I am. I call this the roadmap for public utilities. Think about how computing is almost accessible for everyone. The internet popped up, communication accessible for everyone, becoming public markets, a lot of competition there. And then we have our web shops, open economies. You can start something from your bathroom if you want. And then the social networks started kicking in. Heavy competition about your personal identity. Everybody wants to become your identity provider. Of course, that's so not self-sovereign, so let's not do that. And now this Internet of Value pops up because we can create blockchain-type networks that basically encode assets and resources and value. And we're not just sending information, but really something that happens in the real world, value creation. So then we're entering into new types of public markets. One of them would be knowledge, sharing data and intelligence. The other one would be energy and materials, atoms and bits. But in the end, what we're trying to achieve is maybe create an intelligent ecosystem that can solve really hard problems together and has an incentive to do so. So if something goes wrong, for example, we had the guys from Grex that were looking into early warning systems and rescue operations. And these type of things can be deployed globally, but they need to coordinate according to a form of intelligence. If that intelligence now stays with platforms and individuals, then nobody can really benefit from it. So a public utility means that every sector here is accessible for everyone at fair share. Now, how does this work? And this is kind of the world where I live in, is that, well, think about how to start up a company. Some of you are now thinking, oh, let's start a company. I just want to give you an alternative design. That's what we're trying to do. I think both could migrate into each other, but a typical startup would say, well, we have a little bit of an idea. We go for VC funding. They take a bit of equity. We build out a pilot. We go further and then try to find some customers, maybe have another round, another equity. So And then you go to VCs and all types of funds, convertible loans, and that's very interesting because it allows you to bootstrap, but it separates equity from work. And what we're trying to do with this crypto economic activity is to merge it into one thing. If you provide work to the system, then you get token, and token is equity. It's one thing now. The amount of tokens you have in the network is the amount of equity and stake in the network, but it's also the amount of resource power you contribute to the network. So this is a very interesting paradigm shift because it allows people to really be engaged with the network and to make it self-sustaining and even anti-fragile. Now, there's of course people that want to get some work done. For example, get your transaction across Bitcoin, maybe run a smart contract, maybe access a data pool, access a compute resource, storage. All these virtual services are quite easily to encode into tokens. And then you have a token flow. Of course, there's still room for investors, and as I gather, there's like 3-4 times more VCs into the crypto assets than into traditional funding. So, embracing this token model where contributors get rewarded for the work they do, investors get equal stake, but that's very interesting. Then you really can incentivize people to co-own the product, the mission, and the vision. There's a lot of types of tokens that you can look at. Well, that's kind of the thing we're looking at the most is how can we create a useful token for our system? And does every system need to be tokenized? We're looking at, globally, people would call it crypto assets. If you have something like Bitcoin, you're more a store of value because you're not really using it too much for transactions. And there are security tokens, there's interesting crypto collectibles, which you could regard as a unique claim that you own something, a license, maybe a birth certificate, maybe your real estate house would come under an NFT. Everything that might have a physical ownership title, you can then create a token out of it. And then you can fractionalize that token. And you can share it around. So you don't have to have one big investor. You can basically do a lot of pooling investment as well with these things. We're working a lot around those utility tokens. And then people ask us, what's our business model? Well, it's just to maximize the value of the token. It's maximize the velocity that that token goes around, the amount of resources getting added to the system. And then we as early movers, we believed in our system, we co-created it, we got a little bit of allocation, and in the end that should then be our retirement fund or something like that, if this ever kicks off. But that's the risk you take as a startup founder as well. So the question is, do you work from something that you believe in, a mission, or do you work from something that an enterprise wants you to build? They're two different things. And we're trying to get ourselves with these token funding rounds a bit of runway to actually make something new, a new economy, not patching an old dinosaur. So there's a lot of things how you can do that. We can have a chat afterwards. I think one of the most straightforward things would be a token as access control to resources, sharing data, sharing compute, cloud services through blockchain. That's possible. Signaling and curation, where human work about saying, I label this as good or bad, as quality or low quality. That's a very interesting token to do. And governance as well, where one vote, one token, maybe you can do other kind of stuff. But then you create real communities. And communities are more important than economies, because communities have economies, but they also have governance, regulation, tasks, funds, all of these things attached. So one of these things we're trying to do is collective intelligence, like trying to group people, data scientists around big problems, giving them assets and compute and algorithms. One guy ever published all the measurement points of his gold mine on the web. I put a little contest around that, and then he actually struck gold. Things that are really interesting as well are decentralized autonomous agents, organizations. And this excites me probably the most because if you look at something like Nature 2.0, then the first thing you're going to do, and that's actually possible, is create new economical agents, legal agents, that are non-human. It's the first time ever done. And Malta recently published, 5 minutes. Malta recently published a new law that they approve decentralized autonomous organizations. There doesn't have to be a human liable for this. So what if we start thinking, what if some things just don't belong to people? But they belong to themselves, natural resources, maybe monuments. There's things like blockchain life forms, plantoids, that actually form themselves on the web. They take resources, assets, tokens from humans, and they consume them somewhere else. This Terra Zero is a forest that owns itself. It has a wallet. It can make decisions. It can count how many trees it has. It can count how many trees it can cut off. People that want trees pay the forest, but not a person. So I think that's really, really exciting stuff. And put some AI underneath of that, and it gets nutters. Other things are like tokenizing physical and virtual assets, and it's called non-fungible tokens because they're not really market-driven, they're more like asset-driven. There's this thing called Decentraland, CryptoKitties. There's a lot of game attributes that people are starting to tokenize and share. Domain names, virtual scarcity. So it's really creating digital scarcity. And this was one of the ideas we had with Ascribe 5 years ago, and now people finally found a way to market it better than us. Good. I think this is close to my last slide. Here I'm comparing a bit about the difference between enterprises and crypto communities. So instead of having a CEO, you would have a decentralized autonomous organization with some governance around it. You don't incorporate, you create a foundation, an NGO or something. Instead of finding funding and public offering, it's all about finding a fair way to distribute your tokens. They didn't align correctly, but what excites me the most is that you don't work with patents, trade secrets, or proprietary information. You basically work in open source, public domain, and we see this a lot that in Berlin, a lot of other companies come to us and have something we call protocol jams or whiteboard sessions, and the amount of information that gets disseminated and accepted is way faster than you can ever have with a company. Because you can just openly talk about everything you're doing. And people are incentivized to collaborate because they're co-owner, co-equity stakeholder of any type of project they want. And we have a lot of bounties and hackathons rather than hire a consultant. You just say, put a bounty on the web. And then we have a lot of bullshit bingo, like Moon, Lambo, Hodl, and Biddle. There's a lot of trolling and memeing as well, which is fun. For Blockchaingers, what I see, it's a bit like plankton. They feed the ecosystem. It's this huge influx of interesting people, ideas, and I remember from last year, the 2017 one, a lot of them, like, they couldn't go back anymore to their previous company and started a startup, and they're now mostly very successful. So that's really interesting to see. For us as well, like, the feedback we get from BigchainDB, for BigchainDB and from is very amazing. We have guys contributing code. A lot of people that are just sharing their code, like the guys from Kriya, they even launched a BigchainDB node, they made special images. I had a chat with Consens about the bot, and you just put the code out there, they take it, they improve it, and they give it back to the community. And that's the beauty of it. We call it devotion. All right. Of course, we then also try to do our best, like we're Berlin-based, but if you come to Berlin, definitely you'll get a meetup with a lot of exposure to the community. We do blog posts together with you guys. And recently, we're gonna announce raindrops, which are like bounties, and then you can, and that's our community aspect, which we call commotion. All right. That was it. I think I'm still within scope, so thank you all.
Thank you, sir. I found it really interesting how you were showing this new concept of equity, not because you've put money in, but because you've shown an amount of work and presumably the value of that work. Yeah. Are you aware of a book written by an American guy called Mike Moyer called Slicing Pie?
No, but
all right, we need to have, maybe not today, but an in-depth conversation about this, because particularly for the startups amongst you, or those who are thinking about creating a startup, obviously in those early days you're putting in so much work as a team, but you might not have a company yet, you might not have a product yet. So he came up with a model that basically allows everybody to account for the work they put in, even if that work is, for example, getting a sales lead. So if you think about getting a sales lead, what is the value of that? Nobody knows, but actually there are mechanisms such as commission. And so if there are rules in your governments that says, hey, a commission deal is worth, I don't know, 5%, you could build that into a smart contract. Anybody who then delivers a commission deal gets 5%, which becomes tokenized as work, and we go way down the rabbit hole.
That's a holy grail, to measure fair value capture at each stage, and then...
You and I are going to have a lot of fun, and I fear there might be alcohol in that session.
I think so.
Fabulous. Ladies and gentlemen, Dimitri de Jonghe.